In this video, we'll take a look at how we can validate data inside of our database. The data validator is built into the DB Tools application. Simply double-click on it, click Validate DB, select the validation options. Keep in mind the more options that you have selected, the longer the validation process will take, and then go ahead and press the Validate button. This will give you the ability to select the database you're interested in and go ahead and double-click on it. As soon as you do this, it'll begin the validation procedure. When this happens, what it's going to do is make a special copy of the database, which basically expands everything in it, and then it's going to start going through and checking for anything that is contradictory at any point inside of the database. While this is running, it's going to create a special CSV output if you select this checkbox down here, as well as an item inside of the database itself. All right, the database procedure has completed. We're going to press OK. Go ahead and close that out. And now we have two different sources of our information. We can take a look at the CSV file itself if we choose to do so. Now, keep in mind, if you have a spreadsheet program, this is going to be a little bit more clear, but it does break each item individually. Or the other option we have is if we actually open up the database itself, is you'll have this thing called validation, which in the event that you cannot find it, you can simply come up here and type in validation, and it'll come up. So what this is going to do now is give you a detailed list of all the different problems that came up inside of this database. Most of these items are relatively self-explanatory. For example, we can see with this particular engine that it has full speed in use, but it uses no fuel. So we have to go take a look at this particular numbered propulsion to find out why it is doing that. Coming down here, we can see we have an aircraft that has a maximum altitude with no cruise speed. That could definitely be problematic depending on how it goes. Coming down here, we have a couple different options. Things like we have entry and command guidance has a self-destruct range greater than the anti-submarine range. We have items that we have capable versus land targets, but we forgot to put in some kind of range. We have items that tell us how much fuel we should have. In this case, this particular ship of 3291 should be carrying 7,000 kilograms of fuel. Taking a look underneath some propulsion items here, we can see that we have some engines for slow speed, but it gives us issues. Crawling down here, it tells us exactly what our sensor concerns are. In this case, this particular facility is supposed to only have one entry of this particular item. Scrolling down and taking a look some more, it'll tell us what the guided weapons fuel load should be based on what this is. And again, this is solid because we can just go ahead and come back and create our own. It'll tell us what the ranges are, but it lets us know what its air ranges are. In this case, this particular weapon is teeny tiny, but for some reason it can shoot greater than 500 meters, which is pretty substantial for it. We also have weapons that can be capable against helicopters, but not against aircraft. If you recall, going back a few videos, this is our gun. This is our gigantic 125 millimeter. I don't think it is capable against aircraft, but we could put in a very small value for that purpose. Keep in mind, anything if we create a new fuel, you can end up with duplicates, which happen. And then we have all the loadout errors. There are a tremendous amount of these, so you have to be very, very careful as far as these goes. Most of these, again, are going to be self-explanatory, such as using a laser weapon, but you're using it in bad weather. That simply is not a combination that works. Other items we can have is if we have selected the wrong type of profile, it'll tell us things like, do we have a sensor that doesn't actually have a facing? We can have items where we have directors, but they don't have any sort of illuminators so they can guide weapons towards the target. We could have items where the payload and drag modifier is 0, even though it's carrying a payload. That can make a massive, massive difference. It usually means we forgot to calculate something. We have different items as far as helicopters, which have better fuel performance than they're supposed to. It'll even tell us things like if our sensors are facing the wrong arc, or they have no legal arc for these particular items. And again, we could go take a look at these individual facilities and identify why they're in the wrong arc here. Keep in mind, just because it doesn't pass validation does not mean it is completely broken. The other thing we can see here is coming down under sensors. It'll remind us things like we have an illuminator, but we have no bandwidth. So we created this beautiful illuminator and we can't shine it on anything, for example. We could also run into situations such as a weapon that has no maximum speed for a particular target. So we'd have to go into there and actually define it directly. We could also set things up. For example, our optimum cruise speed is wrong. This is something we could go back and correct very quickly. We also can see that the sensor, in this case, it's a space search radar, but the maximum altitude is too low to detect anything in space. That could definitely cause an interesting problem depending on what you're trying to achieve. Coming through all of our facilities, so we see multiple of these facilities have no radar signature. Chances are those facilities are underground and that's the reason they're not visible, or there's some kind of marker on the map and they're not critical. We can also see places where we've accidentally loaded too much ammunition into one mount. We can always go back and make direct changes to that. We can also see places where the magazine mount did not have enough items loaded into it. In this particular case, we could go back and check that one as well. We have a couple different items here where we have particular items that have OODA loop, but they don't actually have weapons on board, so there's no reason to put that loop in. We also have the ability to go through and see if the visual sensors have no search capability. If we've done a data link and we've forgotten to accidentally link it to the item that it's supposed to be linked to. We have a couple examples down here where weapons, for example, is anti-aircraft capable, but we forgot to attach some kind of guidance to it so it can actually direct the weapon, which is something we can go back and check. Coming down here, we're just looking through a bunch of these here. We can even see, for example, this one. This is a classic mistake everybody will make, where the rate of fire does not match the magazine's rate of fire. This kind of issue comes up all the time and can be quickly corrected by simply making sure the weapon record rate of fire magazine agrees with the actual magazine that is feeding that weapon record. And of course, taking a look at the bottom, we can also see all these different items. So again, the validator is your best friend in the universe. Not only does it do math for you, but it'll even take something that you can take out and actually go back later on to and go ahead and be able to make changes to.